Is she here?
Is she here yet?
You're welcome.
I d-
It's okay. It's tricky when you're adding vendors and products. You have to think.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PRSA Diversity and Inclusion webinar. Please remember to mute your phones or computers as we're going to give it about 2 minutes and let everyone log in. But I thank you all for joining PRSA Memphis chapter for this lovely conversation on diversity and inclusion, moving from conversation to action. By the way, I am the programming chair for the RSA Memphis chapter and the incoming president-elect for 2021. So excited to have you all. And I'm gonna just keep it right here for just a minute and give people a minute to join before we go on with any opening announcements of what's happening with PRSA. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be beginning in just a minute or so. We're just giving all of the attendees the opportunity to join before we begin with the opening announcements for PRSA, and then passing it over shortly to Alicia Tillery, where she's going to lead the conversation today on diversity. We're going to give it just another few seconds, and then we'll begin. How's everybody doing today? Y'all doing all right?
Wonderful.
All right, all right. It's going to be a great conversation. Lovely seeing all the amazing faces. I see a few faces I haven't seen before. So welcome everyone. If this is your first time attending one of the PRSA Memphis chapter and you feel that you enjoy the information that you want to hear today, and you're thinking about becoming a member, feel free to email us. We would love to talk to you about membership. All right, all right, all right. Well, I am going to go ahead and begin with the housekeeping notes for the PRSA Memphis chapter. My name is Milton Howard III.
Huh? Is somebody talking to you?
All right, we're gonna be sure to mute your screens, everyone. Let's see if I can manually do that. And we still have people coming in too as well. Let's see. Mute, mute, mute. Okay, I'll begin again, everyone. My name is Milton Howery. I am the Director of Public Relations for Memphis Tourism, and I am the Programming Chair for PRSA Memphis Chapter and the incoming President-elect for 2021. I'm so glad to have you all here. I just want to briefly, before I hand it over to our Diversity Inclusion Chair, Alicia, I wanted to just talk to you briefly about things that are happening with PRSA. If you are not a member or if you are a new and returning member, you can now rejoin PRSA. There is a code called Triple Play 20, as you can see there on the screen. I'll leave this here for a few seconds. And if you want to come back to it and need some more information, please reach out to PRSA. We would love to make sure that you all are able to register and use this code. If you have any issues, please let us know. But we definitely appreciate all of our new and returning members. All right, let's see here. Also, you all should have received from Alicia an email about diversity and inclusion, a survey that we hope that you're able to complete. If you did not receive this survey, please make sure that you reach out to Alicia or myself to make sure that we can get you this link, because we want to definitely would like to get your input on this survey as we evaluate our diversity and inclusion efforts. Also, Communicator of the Year Award is coming up. So I would like all of you to think real hard about that amazing individual. And there's a lot of them out there this year. It's been a hard year for all of us PR practitioners, and someone out there deserves an award for that service. So please think long and hard about who you would like to nominate and send that email to the address you see here on the screen, and or you can send it to as well as to anybody of our board members, and we'll get it onto the right nomination committee so that they can make sure that we can make sure that their nomination is received and accounted for as we review this and as we review nominations. All right, and let's see. We also have, if you want to become a sponsor, so if you have an organization, a NOR organization that would love to sponsor one of our events, whether it be, them speaking at the beginning of a webinar, or whether them sharing their, sending their logo and sending being included in our email list or some way. If you have an organization that wants to be a part of PRSA, they would like to sponsor or make a connection to our members in a meaningful way, please don't hesitate to send me an email to miltonhoward@memphistravel.com. All right, so at this point, I'm going to, also one more thing, please be sure all members to tune in to November, where we're going to announce an incoming board for 2021. And so we still actually do have 2 slots that are still available if anyone's interested in joining the board, one being assistant treasurer and one being secretary. So if you are interested in joining the PRSA 2021 board, please email me as soon as you can to miltonhoward@memphistravel.com so that we can see if we can include you on the board with our nomination committee. So please send us an email, and please tune in to that webinar next month, because at the beginning of that webinar next month, we will be showcasing the incoming board, and we'll need your vote. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, who has put together a wonderful diversity and inclusion conversation today. And so Alicia, I'm gonna take it to you, and you can take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Milton. Well, good morning, midday to everyone. Thank you so much for carving out some time to share with us and discuss with us. We hope that I know that it's going to be a great conversation, and we hope that we can leave with some takeaways for our own work as practitioners, and maybe some recommendations to take back to our employers. So I want to first start, before I introduce our wonderful panelists, I want to start with some data just to kind of set the foundation for the conversation. So in 2018, during a national PRSA convention, about close to 200 practitioners were surveyed. And here's some of the top data points that came from that survey, which is the most recent data that we have, which says 85% of communications professionals believe diversity in the workplace is important or very important to them. 27% believe that they currently work in an organization that is meaningfully or very diverse. 45% said their organization has implemented actions related to diversity and inclusion as a result of these conversations. And 30% said conversations are happening, but no real internal actions have been put in place. And that's from the Institute for PR.org. So with those stats, it's not a ton, but I think from those data points, there's some aspirations here, but certainly there is still more work to do in the PR industry and PR media overall. And so with that, thank you, Milton, for mentioning the survey that we're sending out from our chapter. The National PRSA does a wonderful job of making sure that they have set standards for diversity and inclusion for the entire organization. And so we want to do our part here in Memphis and make sure that we are held accountable. And so this starts with hearing your voices. So it would be greatly appreciated if you all would, and that's for members and non-members alike, as long as you're in the PR industry, that you complete the survey so we can make sure that our programming, our initiatives, even down to our panelists and guests, our affiliations reflect not only the PR industry and media, but it reflects what it looks like here in Memphis. And that it also reflects what we would hope it to be in the future. So those are some stats. So now I can move on. We know what this conversation is going to be about, to introduce our guests, our panelists. First up is Lori Spicer Robertson. She's the VP, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Saks Fifth Avenue. This is the new role, and we're happy to still have her here in the city of Memphis. And so some of her responsibilities include designing a more inclusive experience for employees, customers, and partners. She's also the former Chief Communications and Engagement Officer at the United Way of the Mid-South, and also the founder and CEO of Wonder, which is a digital media platform and community created to reconnect women and mothers to a life of joy. So welcome so much, Lori.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. The next is we have Alexandra Matlock. She's the founder and president of Contigo Creative, which is a Latino and multicultural marketing and PR agency here in Memphis. She's a native of Medellin. Did I pronounce that correctly, Alexandra?
Medellin.
Medellin. So I was off a little bit. Colombia, and she built this agency to make sure that they offer essential insight on how to speak to the needs of and values of Latino communities. So thank you, Alexandra, for joining us. Siobhan Riley is a journalist and TV reporter here at Fox 13, an award-winning journalist. She's also been the director of marketing and communications for Tennessee State Representative's District Office. She's the chairperson for the Council of Presidents for the National Association of Black Journalists, and is also the former president of the Memphis Association of Black Journalists here in Memphis. And Siobhan will also offer a unique perspective because not only does she have a former PR and marketing experience, but as a reporter, we all know as practitioners, we are really just one big happy family. We cannot do our jobs effectively without each other. And lastly, we have Rico, who's the owner of Rico Freelance. Rico is a bilingual Latinx entrepreneur and LGBT plus business leader, and he specializes in advertising and marketing strategies. His company, Rico Freelance, is locally owned and is a digital marketing strategy company. He also is a managing publisher for the Focus brand. So I see you're ripping with your shirt. For the Focus brand and magazine in Memphis and in the Nashville metro area. And that brand serves the area's LBGT plus communities and allied communities as well. So welcome, Rico. If I didn't say welcome, Siobhan. Looking forward to this conversation. So before we jump in with questions, let's take a look at just one little piece of information, a little infographic. Okay, so I am not going to be the expert on this. I just want this to be another start off point for us. But I found this demographic, which shows that often D&I, I'm just going to say it to shorten it, D&I is mentioned in a package deal. But there are really two different definitions. And I also included equity here, which I'm not sure that we can talk about these two without moving towards equity. So diversity speaks to diversity of people and perspectives. Inclusion speaks to power, voice, and organizational culture, and that should lead us to equity, which gives us results. So that's really where we want to move to, and that's what we want the conversation to be more about, not just talking, but moving to conversation. So with that, and anyone can answer this question, the first question for you is, in your opinion and from your seats, what exactly is diversity and inclusion, and what does that look like realistically, particularly in this industry of PR and media? Lori, we can start with you.
Sure, I was trying to find my mute or unmute. So I think when you say it in terms of PR and media, it's about being more inclusive in your storytelling, right? It's amplifying the voices or unearthing untold stories. I think so often, if we reflect back in history, and we've seen a lot of that happen this year, that we have missed or escaped some of the critical people who should have been told in our stories. And so, or should have been mentioned in our history. And I think so PR and its ties to diversity and inclusion is really about an inclusive experience, right? Or a well-rounded experience of all of the different identities that show up in our world, and how do we share those experiences with others. I think more in a practitioner world, diversity, inclusion, equity, people like to refer to diversity in terms of people. But if you think about the term diversity, people or an individual is not diverse, right? It is a group of people a workplace of people that makes it diverse. And oftentimes we look at visible diversity, so demographic, racial, ethnicity, gender, but we miss the things that you can't see. And I think that's where we start to unpack bias. I think inclusion's right is, am I voiced or am I valued? Do I feel like I'm part of this team, of this culture? And then equity says, once I am within a place or an organization, do I have access, right? And it's often confused. We're having this discussion now. It's often confused with equality. Equal says I'm giving everybody the same across the board, but it negates my experience. It negates all the things that I have come from. And so equity says, let's take that in consideration as we give you the tools and resources you need for success. So hopefully I answered your question.
Absolutely. And then, thank you. Anyone else like to add to Lori?
Well, when I think about diversity and inclusion, to me, it's something that it has to be intentional. It's about making sure you have a seat at the table, not just in the workplace, but people that you are interviewing on a daily basis. And clearly during this pandemic, diversity and inclusion, they're needed now more than ever. I think the main thing when it comes to this is making sure that we are speaking up for the voiceless, whether it's at your job, making sure that those stories about the person in South Memphis or the stories about the person in North Memphis or Fraser or whatever don't go untold. And I think this pandemic has really given us an opportunity, at least I can speak for myself. I told somebody recently, I feel that a lot of the stories that have sometimes been a struggle to tell during my career, because I worked in newsrooms where there wasn't a lot of diversity and it was just hard to help people understand why this story matters. I think now there's just no excuses, and it's really given us a platform to make sure that everyone's voice, that it's heard.
I'd like to add in on that if I could. I know in our professions, we're storytellers. So I love everything that Lori and you are saying. I think there's one step further that we have to consider things, and it comes down to how people want to be perceived. Something as little as understanding pronouns. And if you're really going to talk the talk, make sure your handbook has that in there. Make sure your language abides by that, and make sure when you're addressing folks, you're asking, what their pronouns are.
I'm on a webinar, but that's okay. I'm not too busy to talk to you.
So here's the time that I ask if everyone can mute themselves, that would be great. Okay, I'm sorry, Rico. And if you could also, just for folks who may not be aware, I'm sure everyone is, but just in case, can you explain the pronouns and the importance of using that in your language?
Sure. My pronouns are he, him, his. There are her, hers, they, them. Gender, I know Lori talked about sex and race, things that are visible, but sometimes they may be perceived as visible as a male or a female, or you may be wrong. So making sure you address that equally and meet them where they're at is equally important to just the grand scheme of things. Another thing that Lori mentioned that I really wanted to point out in diversity and inclusion is there are things that are unseen. So I don't like to call them disabilities, but things that you may not know, like someone may have a hearing issue, or someone may have mental wellness things that they're kind of going through. So you don't always see what the diversity and inclusion pieces are for people. So it's important to kind of think about that whole scope.
Absolutely. And I will share, just in a previous conversation with Alexandra, she shared something with me about how D&I, to your point, Lori, is maybe to folks who aren't as privy, is kind of changing and expanding. So Alex, do you mind speaking to that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very, very excited to participate in this panel. And yes, I would like to just briefly say that for 5 years I worked an expo, that we organized, that it was the Multicultural and International Career Expo. And precisely our intention was to bring other groups into the eyes of HR groups and HR professionals to really being included in that process of hiring. So during that time of the 5 years of experience working, working the event, there was a gap. There was just a gap between what I hear from the HR departments and what I hear from people that they were hired. And so I had both ears. And I saw there was a huge gap between the really and intentional efforts to be inclusive and diverse in the workplace, but also there was a disparity in the real life. And then because of that, I was really very inspired to continue working with my own journey, and I seek a certification with Gallup. So during these 3 years that I have been certified by Gallup, strengths coach certified by Gallup, things are very important to identify here. And because these 3 words are really buzzwords to say diversity, inclusion. A lot of people think that they mean the same, and it's not the case. Diversity, like the other panelists explain, is any difference between individuals and groups where you take in consideration demographics like race, gender, religion, age, nationality, gender orientation, but the new tendencies are even broader, are really adopting different views like lifestyle, personality, options, opinions, education level, even family composition. So really, just to have a wide demographic alone will not make a difference in the organization unless that the people that are in those demographics are really being welcome and genuine welcome into the organization. While inclusion, it's a different aspect. Inclusion is really the continuing process of the diversity, because inclusion talks about the opportunity of these individuals to feel valued, recognized, to feel integrated, to feel respected, and to feel engaged to fully participate with the organization. Because at the end of the day, you can have a very diverse group, and most of the time is just to being compliant to, okay, my company will be safe, we will not have any problem because I have a policy. But if you really want to make a difference, you have to take these policies and see how you can really cultivate a true and congruent culture where you will align your workforce into just one direction. And most important is to everyone, top to bottom, they need to really feel that they are part of the group and not feel like this is just an effort from HR and all the diversity and inclusion falls into HR, because it's not the way. As everybody knows, how much is the loss in revenue for a company when they lose talent. They invest a lot of money.
Alex, I want to put a pin there because you said something about HR and it being associated with that department, and a lot of the D&I comes down from their department, but there's additional work We definitely want to get more into that because we definitely want to find out how companies, what are some real and actionable things that companies and departments, even PR departments, can do to make sure that D&I is not being performed, but it's actually, being carried out with, with fidelity. So I do want to move on and kind of move back. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. To Siobhan, you mentioned the pandemic. How has the pandemic, and not just the pandemic, but the social injustice, the killings, the protests, all of those things, has that affected or caused a shift in diversity and inclusion in you all's work, and particularly for Alex and Rico in your businesses because you own your own agencies? Rico, would you like to speak to that?
I was going to let the ladies go first, but I can speak to that, yes.
Sure.
As far as diversity and inclusion has gone in our business this year with COVID, it's really tested everyone in every aspect, and it continues to do so. I think having a team that you cultivate where you've got a culture that's there and you've got visions that you're trying to get your whole crew aligned with. To speak to Alex's point, when you've got a vision and you've got a direction for how you want to lead, not just yourself and your work, but your team, those kind of things ripple out into the community. So for us, I think we've always had that vision and values that aligned within our community. I think in the last several months, it's gotten much stronger within our team. But I think it's also been a learning moment for a lot of us, especially for myself, learning and growing as a leader and understanding how I can be a better communicator and how I can speak through design a little bit better. So for me, we all think that we're great and we do well, but this year was really a slap in the face to let you know, hey, there are real issues here, and you can effectively, as leaders and influencers, create some change. So like Alex said too, it's got to start from the top and it's got to go all the way to the bottom. If there's any lag in that space, you're going to miss out on folks. So getting people to buy into your diversity and inclusion plan and actually implementing something and asking people, our team's very open, we're very collaborative. We talk about projects and we talk about processes all the time. And it's intentional and it's deliberate so that we ask their opinion. Our team's pretty diverse and everybody's come to the table for a specific reason. So it's important that I get those aspects and those answers from them. So that's kind of how it's changed for us, I think, for the better.
I can say as far as the pandemic, I think that it's really giving news stations an opportunity to do what we really haven't been doing for so long. And I could speak from experience. Because of the pandemic, because of all the social unrest, we launched a new program within our entire company, and it's called Fox 13 Gets Real, but at each station has a different, WSB Gets Real, whatever their call letters are. And we really get an opportunity to dig deep into stories. And there was a story that I did about a month, maybe 2 months ago. It was about the struggle for women to feel equal in America. And I'm sure everyone has seen the doll baby experiment where you take two Barbie dolls, you take a white Barbie doll and a black Barbie doll, and you ask which doll is beautiful. And we had 5 and 6-year-olds, and both girls said the white doll baby was beautiful. They loved the doll baby's blonde hair, blue eyes. The black Barbie was ugly, uneducated. They would never take her to a birthday party. And these were the things that came out of the mouths of 5 and 6-year-olds. And that story really helped the conversation just within my workplace. I had people who don't look like me coming up to me saying, thank you for doing that story. That helps me to understand some things, that teaches me how I need to act in the workplace or the conversations that I need to be having. So I can say that this pandemic has really opened the door to some very uncomfortable conversations, but it's really giving people an opportunity to kind of have a voice now.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to
Yeah.
add, or I'm sorry?
Yeah, I would like to just share some insights from global research from Gallup, that how this time, the 2020, has really taken the diversity inclusion into a different level, because things that I was talking before, like even family composition, that is really getting into the equation. For example, now the diversity, it's not just the before the mother that was taking the car and going and drive to their place. Now it's different, because the same mother needs to stay home. And what is the family composition of that mother? For example, is will have the help with the father. It's a single mom. So those things are really new and very eye-opener situations to incorporating the diversity, which that for me, it's a great opportunity. I'm seeing really 2020 as a great eye-opener. At least I can speak for myself. I have grown in different aspects that I haven't before. I have really seen angles that I haven't, but one of them is the angle of how people are really performing and unifying their personal life and their personal life and the workplace. So that it's one aspect new from this, but the other aspect is it's how you have to start creating a different awareness of, okay, for example, when you are working together, you have more immediate answers. You can walk to others office and ask. Now you have to be more aware that you will send a text message, you will send an email, you have to give some space to that person to really answer to you, and not expect the same speed of answer that it was before. So the telework has really opened up a whole new set of rules on how you communicate with a team.
Right. And you know
Yeah.
what? Speaking of that, Alex, there was there was something you said, and I really want to, as we talk about voice and working together, I really want to dig into what practitioners and folks doing the work are experiencing and how we can help make the shift. How can practitioners, and that's whether you are practicing or you own your own agency or freelance, what have you, but how can you really get your clients, the folk you work with, to tap into diversity and inclusion, which we know can help them in their campaigns and in their work? Have you had instances where your client may have been a bit reluctant to be as inclusive as maybe they should be to meet their goals? And if so, what have you been doing, and what should we be doing to have those open conversations? Let me get some feedback from Lori.
So I'll answer that question from my different hats, my bi-professional hats. I think as an entrepreneur, it really starts with your values, right? Like, what is your company? Let me apologize. This is about to be lunchtime, so my kids might run in here. Who knows what they'll be doing?
No
but I think it really starts with your values of your company. What do you stand for? What's your purpose? And being earnest to that and not shifting. And so you may have clients that don't align with that, and you have to be comfortable with saying, you know, this is a two-way street. I think what you're asking of me doesn't really align with our values and our company purpose. But I think on the other side is just being honest, right? And sharing upfront that these are your beliefs, this is what you stand for, and giving the customer the opportunity to respond and say, yes, I'm in agreement. Tell me more. I want to learn or understand more. And then moving forward in that direction. I think for companies, the shift or intentionality has really been around thinking differently about how you do business. For instance, in the retail world, we've lived in the double pandemic, right, of COVID, who affected shopping like never before. Because for stores who had not already been forward thinking and put a lot of their energy into digital marketing, into their web presence, into online shopping, we see so many of those retailers closing or, you know, no longer open or being shifted or sold to different owners. I think the silver lining for us is that many of the competitors that were in our space were not able to evolve, right? Or not able to stay present and relevant. And so that has added to, I think, the work that we do at our company in a positive way. But I think it has also given us the onus that how do we shift and remain relevant, right? How do we continue to best serve every customer and give luxury and experience to everyone, which before, if you were a luxury or designer shopper, that was an exclusive experience. It was only for the elite. Everybody couldn't experience that. But we recently just shifted our culture norm to say, we want to be luxury disrupted. Like, how do we do luxury differently? And regardless of your economic status, how do we give you the experience of luxury and help you thrive through fashion? And so I think when you talk about customers, but when you also talk about our vendors, it is being true to our values and what we stand for and our purpose again, which for large companies, that's scary. I mean, you don't want to push people away that you've worked with for years. You don't want to say no to a viable customer either. But I think the world is now holding us accountable of who we are and what we stand for. And so we have to own that and be present in that space, regardless if you're a vendor or a customer. So excited to see that, excited to, again, crazy year for us, but I think it has pushed people into spaces of intentionality that no one's had to really face before. You're on mute, Alicia.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. But I was agreeing that I'm known for that in my work circles. But definitely it has pushed people and organizations to places that they wouldn't have gone before. I do want to call attention to the chat box. As always, a lot of great conversation, folks dropping in helpful information and links there. So make sure to check that out. Additionally, we'll be wrapping up the panelist questions and opening up Q&A for attendees. So feel free to drop your questions there and we'll move from there. I did also see, Rico, you put in the chat, not all clients are good clients. So do you want to add to that as we talk about shifting and folks who may not be as willing to move towards that diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I'll start with, when COVID struck and, business everywhere was affected, from a financial perspective or point of view, we were in survival mode and we were trying to make sure that we took on any kind of work that we could. And my finance manager is on this call and she would agree with me that that's not always the best case because you end up working and doing more on projects and some of them end up costing you money in the long run. To Lori's point, as far as working with someone who shares the same values as you, that's kind of a culture thing within your organization, or if you're a freelancer or if you're working with a firm. Know who you're working for, know who you're working with. That's really important too when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because you can walk the walk and talk the talk, but if you turn around and take money from somebody that does not align with their values, you're just as bad as anyone else. So that's why I said not all clients are good clients, and really, do your homework and think about who you're working with. On the client front too, that's not a easy or difficult conversation to have with somebody. When you just are talking through some of the things that are important to them, you can find out, where they're at and what they're thinking. So just be aware of the clients that you take on and make sure that you're not selling yourself short and you're, supporting your values and what you really believe in.
Great,
Well,
thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would like to add a personal experience. One of the work that I do as not just in the agency, but also as a Gallup coach and as a culture coach is I have experienced a lot of calls from people and organizations that really want to work precisely this time into or put together a culture, and they didn't have it. So I feel like this time was very disruptive for a lot of companies, and actually that's one of the things that I have grown in this time. It's to really work with organizations that are now intentional to start cultivating and creating a different culture. So I have been able to work with different organizations where before this whole pandemic, they didn't have the awareness of the importance of having a culture. But before you integrate the diversity and inclusion, if you really don't have a culture embedded in your organization, really we are just following a protocol. We are just following a compliant and in a legal aspect to protect the company from a potential lawsuit, and not really a true transformation. So in order to have a transformation and in order to integrate diversity and inclusion, how you do it by identifying what kind of culture you want to be. Talk to the individuals within your organization and align them into what is the values of your organization, and then create that a ecosystem of feel welcomed. Because if you feel like you're not welcome, or you are being um, just left out, even your brain, even your brain will not perform well, because you will enter into a fear mode.
Correct.
and
So
and,
that's
and
great,
the
Alex.
fear mode is totally just like you're out of your element. I mean, you
Alex,
now are
Alex, Alex.
disengaged.
Alex, just one. So you made a great point. You like magically made all the points that we want to transition into. You mentioned about being intentional. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question before we move to open Q&A. And whoever wants to answer, just shoot. I would love for to get the spectrum, as we have many folks on the call who are working for corporations. They may be working for themselves or in teams or for small agencies. But what are those intentional things that either we should be doing as practitioners or that our employers should be doing? What can we do if you don't have a large D&I team or a director? What are some things that absolutely need to be happening? What's the starting point?
I think it comes to kind of what I was saying at the earlier part of the conversation. We have to learn how to speak up. And I'll give you an example. One of the companies that I was working for, which I won't name the company, but there were, the market, predominantly Black market. When you walked into the newsroom, all of the managers, most of them were white males, or a few white stay-at-home moms. No African Americans making decisions about what goes on TV. So I went to the manager and just said, "What can I do to help you bring in more talent who represent what this community looks like?" And that manager really respected me for asking that question. And not long after that, they did hire an African American manager. Again, it just goes to making sure we are having those conversations and holding people accountable and not being afraid to have those conversations. And then the last thing I will say, and this speaks more to PR side, just making sure that, when we're interviewing people, that we're getting people on air who really represent, again, diversity and inclusion. And last example is right when the pandemic hit, I was having a very hard time trying to find someone of color to talk about, a doctor of color. I called around to several hospitals. I could not find anyone. And I even asked, do you have someone who is willing to talk? I couldn't find anyone. Eventually, I had to wait a few days, but I ended up finding someone in a few days. But again, it goes back to, we got to build those relationships and make sure that we are finding people that represent the community and the stories that we're telling.
I'll add, Alicia, that to both points. I think, definitely having someone in the organization that's a change agent, that's where it begins, because so often we will continue doing work status quo as we've done it before until someone shakes it up or asks a question or raises a concern. And then that is really the catalyst to get things moving. I think the other piece is listening. I've worked in this space now for 2 or 3 different organizations, and sometimes people have a change agent and just jump right into the work. I think that is where you start to see lack of sustainability, because people on the front end didn't take the time to listen, right? Listen to your teams, listen to your stakeholders, listen to the people who you're connected with or who are connected to your brand. Because those are where you find the insights. You may assume that, I'll say for companies, diversity often is representation, right? Every company is like, oh, we've got to bring in more diverse candidates. That is the number one thing companies go to. Now, I will say that most companies need to go there, right? That is not something we want to miss, but you can bring in the best talent. And if your culture is broken, then you just brought in great talent into a horrible workplace. And so we all know the phrase that, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. Culture will also eat new employees up. And so they will assimilate to this bad culture. And you'll be like, who was this person? I hired them. They were so great. And then they've come in and they're totally different. And so to Alex's point, every entity, every organization has a culture, but typically if you don't spend the time and typically the money to define that culture, then it may be one that you don't want, or maybe one that is not adding to success. And so I think people like to separate diversity, equity, and inclusion from culture, but it is completely integrated into your culture, your people, your workplace, your brand, your foundation, your giving, and your business. And so you have to tie all those things together to really make it work.
I would like to add on Lori's point, invest in your human capital. It's really very important. These are the corners that organizations cannot cut. Those are investments, because long run, if you really, even if they want to see it from the standpoint of revenue for a company, there's ways that you can even demonstrate how have a culture, have a very defined strategy for inclusion really pays off. For example, people just don't know what they don't know. So you will not do anything by educating certain parts of the organization if you leave out others, because there's even terms that you cannot assume that things are as a matter of fact, precisely because it's a very diverse group. For example, if you take somebody that is coming from another culture, from another country, from another language, it's very different. How is the mentality in America? And I see it a lot, because I work with also clients from Latin America, and I see the different cultures on how you do business in America and how you do business in other countries. So bottom line, assuming is a great friend of the unconscious bias. That's what I put it.
I love that.
Assuming is a great friend of unconscious bias. Even the term unconscious bias is not even very well defined, by organizations to their people. Unconscious bias actually, it's a way how your brain protects you, but it's really how you apply it, or when you have awareness that you are creating a negative assumption of others. So for me, a very smart investment to do for any organization is invest in the human capital, and not just in the C-suite, but all over the whole organization.
Oh,
Last,
Alex, I'm sorry,
okay.
give me one. So I do want to make just one point, because this conversation is a sign of a great conversation, because we're already just 10 minutes out from the meeting being over, and we do have a couple of housekeeping things. But I did want to, there's something that connects with what you've shared, Alex. I'm looking in the chat box, and there are a lot of comments about that we need to listen, that we need to talk to have those conversations. There's a question here that I want to put out there, and it says, how can those of us who are here actively and intentionally learning and growing reach out to and impact those who continue to maintain the thought that there is no issue or problem? So basically, if I'm saying it right, Leela, how do we have these conversations with folks who aren't quite there yet? They're not quite ready to make the shift towards diversity and inclusion.
Well, I would.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. I was actually hoping that maybe Rico could address that first, and then have everyone answer.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I can address it first. I think one of the most important things is continuing the conversation. I put in the chat box, listening is key. There's always going to be opposition in anything that you do, and there's always going to be two sides to a story that people have. I think our job as storytellers, and also folks who are in the D&I space, is to make sure that we're telling the untold stories, and that we're telling stories that would or could change someone's perspective or views, or even educate them. I'll keep my answer brief, but I think that's really where it lies. People are afraid of what they don't know. People have prejudices, and they have perceptions of what they don't understand. So when you can enlighten people, or even, not everyone's going to come to a common ground, but if you educate them enough to a point where they can make their own decisions on things, I think that's what pushes the needle forward.
Thank you. And finally, is there anything else actionable that folks can take back? We know that we need to listen more, that we need to get viewpoints from everyone. We know that culture is key. Lori, I want to put that, you should make that an Instagram post, that it will eat new employees for breakfast as well. So is there any last thing that we should all be doing to keep the conversation going and to keep actionable things at the forefront? And anyone can shoot there.
I'll just add, I assume these are closing. The one thing I wanted to mention after I heard others, you always get new ideas, is two things. One, we see a huge shift this year, more than any other year, of purpose-driven companies. And so as you do D&I work, have a better understanding of what does it mean for a company to be led through purpose. I think consumers and customers, even some vendors, are placing more accountability on companies to care about the communities where they are located, where they do business, but also to lead with purpose versus profits. So I think educating ourselves about that as much as possible. I think the other piece is just being uncomfortable or being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Most people don't want to talk about things they don't know about. So it's not just diversity, equity, inclusion. If you don't know something and someone brings it to you and expecting you to have all the information and knowledge, you too will shut down. And so part of, I think, the journey and the conversation, as Ray mentioned, is to keep it going, right? For a naysayer, you don't want to shut down just because they've shut down. Figure out what's the affinity between you and that individual, right? How can you elevate the conversation in a way that they are understanding, but also that they are there to listen? And then the last piece is a practitioner or a person who is along this journey, go into it with the thought that I too am here to learn, and that, you know, this space is ever evolving just as we are as people. If you come to the table to tell somebody else how to do it, how to know, how to act, how to behave, then you've missed the whole part of the journey. And so it's definitely about learning to, as you're imparting knowledge on others.
And I will add that this time of the COVID era really is accelerating the process of understanding a need for a change. So now more companies are seeking for that solution, and they will start getting out of their comfort zone because the situation per se is like they're being pushed by the situation to open their eyes and to seek other new alternatives to cultivate the diversity and inclusion. So I would say that 2020 it's going to be or it is already a big eye opener for the ones who had the eyes closed for diversity and inclusion.
I'm sorry, there I go muting myself again. I love that, Alex. If so, I think Siobhan, did you have something you wanted to share as well?
Yeah.
And then if that's it, then I will then after you toss back to Milton for closing.
I was just going to say in a nutshell, it's really about just making sure we continue to keep the voices, keep people's voices out there. And I can really speak from both sides, from PR and from a TV side. For me, it's just important to make sure that I'm continuing to tell those stories that really are impactful and really matter. And I think that's what helps, especially with the question you asked, how can we open people's eyes when their eyes remain closed? That's how you do it. You just keep telling those stories. Eventually, somebody will listen. Eventually, you're going to get somebody's attention. And, you know, a lot of times media, we always get criticized for, you know, everything is negative, everything is shooting. But again, I think that's where those relationships come in. If you want, there's some people I can literally go through my phone and there's like 5 people who are constantly emailing me every week, if not every week, every other week. And some of the stories we tell, some we don't, but they are persistent. Eventually you keep reaching out, making sure that those stories are getting out there. That represent diversity and inclusion. Eventually, somebody's going to tell that story.
I love that. So being consistent. Thank you so much, Siobhan, and thank you to each of our panelists. Those who are on the call with us, I hope you learned and had your eyes open to a few things. So we know to have those uncomfortable conversations, be consistent, speak up, and you know, just hold not only our clients but our team members and our employers accountable as well. I want to get these 2 final closing thoughts, and then I will toss back to Milton for a final closing. But Terry, a member of the chapter, mentioned a great point is that to make sure that we are mentoring those younger persons coming up in the PR industry. And Rico, his closing thought is just to be more deliberate in your actions and not your words. So again, conversations, but making sure that we don't neglect the fact that we actually have to do. So with that, thank you all so much. I hope it's been helpful, and I'm tossing to Milton.
All right, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I off mute? Okay. Want to make sure. Thank you, Alicia, for being our diversity and inclusion chair and for leading this important conversation. Thank you to all of our speakers. It was a joy to listen to you. And please, we would love to have you guys back in future webinars because I really enjoyed the conversations and input that you gave. Also, while we're there, on that last note, Terry, also I wanted to highlight Terry, one of our PRSA members who's always very active. She's helped with programming. And Terry also launched recently, it's called First Fridays with a PR professional, where she invites students the first Friday of the month to speak to, she invites students to connect with PR professionals. So if anybody feel like you want to participate in that in 2021, please let us know. We will connect you with Terry. Also, make sure you guys are following us on social media. So if you enjoyed the webinar today, please feel free to talk about it on social media and join it so that more people can know what PRSA Memphis is doing and what we are up to. Also, if you want to join a committee, please email Sheila or myself so that we can connect you with the individual chapter leaders. So from programming to hospitality, diversity and inclusion to the Vox Awards, all those things and more, please, we definitely need your input and for you to join the committees, because it's only through input of our members can we create programming and create the content and information and a host of things that you need for your professional development and as you grow in your career. And then be sure you can go to prsamemphis.org/membership to learn more about becoming a member for PRSA. And again, please be sure to A, answer the surveys that are in your email, and B, tune in next month as we announce the new board for 2021. My name is Milton Howery. Thank you all for attending. We are finishing right on time. All right, you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for tuning in to PRSA Memphis chapter on diversity.
Thank you. Have a great one, you guys.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.